Raptors basketball is almost back. We got media day today. And I don't know about you, but I left media day with a lot more questions than answers. And we're going to break it down. We're going to break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Toronto Raptors media day, what was said, and the narratives that have obviously, whether fairly or unfairly, spilled out about Pascal Siakam, Scottie Barnes, Jakob Poeltl. I liked a lot of what I heard today, this morning. And there's a couple things that I think might be worth addressing. And yeah, let's get to the intro and we'll take your calls. This is a call-in show, so definitely if you have something to say, if you had some observations, if you're currently in mid-flight and are panicking, definitely call in. We can talk about it. All right. All right. Okay. So, like a lot of you, I woke up today and binged media day. I've been starving for Raptors content, starving for an update, starving for some answers. And there are so many questions about the Toronto Raptors right now. What is OG Anunoby's future? What is Gary Trent's role within this team, given that he surprisingly opted into his player contract? How does Dennis Schroeder's summer with Germany impact his role on this team? What version of Scottie Barnes are the Raptors going to be getting? Is it the apparently not super hard training version from the offseason, or is it going to be, a return to the trajectory that the Raptors envisioned when they held him out of trade talks for Kevin Durant last summer and Damian Lillard this summer? We got a couple of, let's say, surprising bits of truth, and I really do love that when these pressers turn into something more candid and honest. And if you're not someone who has time to sit through an hour of pressers and subsequently an hour of fallout interviews that occurred with Will Lou and all those guys, if you just want to pulse on this team and where things are headed, if you want straight truth, my honest suggestion would be to listen to Jakob Poeltl's presser, because I sense no lies. Whether he did what he did with Will Lou afterwards, what he did for the media scrum in general, I just felt like there was a surprising bit of candor and honesty in how he feels. There's not a lot of doom and gloom. There's not a lot of this guy's fault, that guy's fault. There's just a lot of it's going to be tough. Let's wait and see. Now, I've been on the record pretty much all summer saying I'm very excited about this team. I am excited about the changes that they've made. I'm excited about some of the new pieces and how they'll fit in. I am obviously excited about Nick Nurse being out and Fred VanVleet leaving, and hopefully the Raptors piling together a bunch of, people to fill the void and hopefully change the direction. But much like last season's end of year presser, the conversation today started and seemingly just continue to harp on all the talking points from the end of season presser, namely three things. Pascal Siakam's future with the Raptors, that was really present on everyone's mind. The second thing was clearly this idea or notion that continues to be peddled out that Scottie Barnes does not work hard. So, persistent questions about, well, how did you train differently? Did you train better? Did you take your professional basketball career seriously? And, how sometimes lies become truth is just something that I don't want to dig any more into. But clearly, he's come into the season looking a lot different and feeling a lot different about his prospects. And then the third thing, of course, is this idea of selfishness, this idea that, in my opinion, originated on this channel, when we started calling it out last October, November, December, when we were seeing it. And then suddenly it just became part of the lexicon. This is just something that every podcaster at this point, I believe, has just done a deep dive on. And it's like, what is selfishness? Is Pascal going iso ball selfishness? Is Fred, getting 20 assists? Is that selfishness? How can assist be selfish? I think in general, this has been really good for Raptors fans in general, because I think that this has allowed us to, let's say, dig into an element of the game that I think a lot of fans just don't understand, which is, what is selfishness actually? And I think the best answer for it didn't come from Masai Ujiri, and definitely did not come from Pascal Siakam or Scottie Barnes. I think the best answer for it actually came on Will Lou's podcast when they asked Jakob Poeltl about it. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a sore throat, so you might have to forgive me for coughing a couple times. So generally thinking, what Jakob Poeltl said was effectively that at any given time, sometimes doing something like ISO dribbling and taking a mid-range pull-up could be the selfless thing to do if it's the right thing for your team. And ultimately that selflessness and selfishness just came down to an overall philosophy. And I really agree with that. It's not always selfish. Pounding the ball, sometimes surveying, it's not always selfish. Taking, a shot early in the shot clock when you have it is not selfish. I don't find, sometimes, Jimmy Butler or Damian Lillard or someone will just come down and they're kind of feeling it and then they take a shot. I don't think that's selfish. And this accusation of, this player is selfish or this team is selfish should not be taken lightly, because this is a very serious accusation to level at somebody. And it seemed like it was pretty clear to me that Fred VanVleet was a target of a lot of this stuff while he was here. But these conversations have continued to persist, and they continue to be things that the players are asked about. And, it seemed today that whether intentionally or unintentionally, Masai Ujiri talking about selfishness in the same breath as talking about Pascal Siakam a couple of times led a lot of people to sort of piece together that actually when he's talking about selfishness on this roster, he's directing his criticism at Pascal Siakam. Indeed, if Pascal Siakam is the player that the media and, most fans believe he is, and, the accolades speak for themselves, 2-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, then the very first question that we need to ask ourselves as fans is, why does this team not treating him differently? Is it fair or unfair? Do they know something that we don't know? Is there a divide between how the Raptors see Pascal Siakam and how the fans think the Raptors see Pascal Siakam? Clearly, if you've been paying attention to this channel, you know that I don't see Pascal Siakam in the same breath as Damian Lillard and Kevin Durant. There is a gap. And I think if the Raptors are looking at the receipts for the last 3 years of trying to build an offense around him, trying to push him more as a closer, a decision maker within the offense, I think they would have a pretty fair case to make as well, that when it's counted, he has shown the gap between himself and Damian Lillard. It may not always show up in October or November, but it certainly shows up in fourth quarters. It certainly shows up in the numbers. It shows up in the impact metrics. And so I understand the trepidations about wanting to put someone like that on the pedestal and saying, this is our franchise guy, come hell or high water, we're going to build everything around him. Because if you're building around Pascal Siakam, then clearly the media is right. This roster doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Jakob Poeltl doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. And I don't think Scottie Barnes makes a lot of sense around Pascal Siakam. But of course, if you're covertly building around Scottie and OG, then I think every decision makes sense. And I think that that's exactly what the Raptors are doing. I think that the Raptors let it slip that, well, I don't know if they let it slip. I think they just sort of let it be known that OG Anunoby was not on the table for Damian Lillard. Well, if OG Anunoby was not on the table for Damian Lillard and you were having serious conversations about Dame, and Scottie Barnes certainly was not shocked, then the writing is on the wall about what was being offered and what was rejected ultimately. Add to the fact that Atlanta, the fact that the trade rumors became so serious that Pascal's camp felt the need to put out this, stuff about him not wanting to sign an extension. So more importantly than anything, I'm sorry, my throat is just, it's killing me right now. Give me one sec. Okay. Hopefully that's better. My main thing going into today was, is Pascal willing to buy in? Okay, he may not be traded before the season starts. And so he's here and he is your best player. Whether you have optimism about OG Anunoby taking a step, whether you have optimism about Scottie Barnes, ultimately ascending past that, sure. But as of right now, it would be very hard for me to believe that if you played the season out with this roster, that Pascal Siakam is not your leading minute getter and probably your leading scorer, if not definitely your leading scorer. So this is a really big part of your offense for it to not click. And I was listening to his interview, and I got to tell you, I listened to all the interviews, all of them, every word twice. I really wanted to dissect it. I wanted to understand what these guys were saying, and the vibes felt good. The vibes felt very good. Gary Trent Jr. talking about, how Darko Rajakovic is the coach that he's talked to more than any coach in his 6 years. That's great. That's good, man. Like we're 2-3 months into the hire right now. He's already eclipsed the mark that he's had with previous coaches. That's a really good thing. And I could tell from Gary Sr.'s, various media availabilities that Gary was not too happy last season. So it's really good to have him be motivated because he's very needed right now. His shooting is desperately needed in a lineup which will often feature 3 non-shooters. It's good to see him in good spirits. It's great to see Scottie in good spirits. Really great. I don't know if you buy the rumors of him being 6'10", 6'11", whatever the hell, but he is 240. That's out of his mouth. And 240 and in better shape, better cardio. Now, please do not run and to Twitter and be like, see, he wasn't in great shape. There is a difference between being in great shape and being in greater shape. Scottie Barnes, for the last 2 years, in my opinion, has been in great shape. The fact that he put it on himself to be in greater shape is a credit to him. It's not a detriment, and it should not be something that the media irresponsibly uses to vilify him for the season that was last year. I promise you, I watched every minute of last year, twice, thrice sometimes. I don't think most of what happened last year, even as it pertains to him, should be put on him. I like what Darko said. He didn't get too defensive about the lawsuit stuff. I thought that was good. He feels confident that it will be resolved, that the staff member who is currently under investigation, will be cleared. And hopefully, Masai Ujiri, you could tell there was a lot of anger from him. There was you can read anger between the lines of how angry he was that the Knicks had done this. And, the Knicks gonna Nick, right? My old hometown team. They haven't changed one bit since I was there. So, I hope that will just brush over. OG seemed in great spirits. I think, Jakob seemed in great spirits. The only interview that just stuck out to me like this is not like the rest was Pascal Siakam. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard it, but there's a few parts of it that are very alarming to me. And I just want to say it. This is not going to turn into a Pascal Siakam bash fest. I'm not against the guy. I want him to do well. I want him to buy in. But there's a few things that just stuck out. Number one, his being questioned about selfishness because the media member who asked him the question, I can't remember who it was, they said, Masai talked to you first about it. The implication being you are the person with whom this conversation starts. And he became very defensive about it. Went on, a 3-minute, almost unprompted rant about how he's never been selfish. Now, I don't think Pascal Siakam is a selfish player. I do think at times last year that he played selfishly. There is a difference between this is a selfish person or a selfish player. There are players like that in the NBA. I think we all know them. I don't have to count them out. And then there are players that can sometimes do things that are maybe not that, not necessarily conducive to the offense. And maybe they're going a little too far. And I think any player on any given night could be accused of being a little selfish. That doesn't mean the player themselves is selfish by nature. It just means that they need to adjust. They need to adjust the play style. But I found it very ridiculous that he would suggest that given, everything that happened last year, that he's never been selfish, that he's never played selfishly. I think that is a lack of accountability that you do not need on this team. You need a player to come out and say, you know what, last times, if the organization is saying that we did, then we need to adjust. But I didn't hear that. I didn't hear we need to adjust. What I heard was, I've never been selfish. I don't have a selfish bone in my body. I don't play selfish. Y'all are fucking crazy because, sometimes I got 2 defenders on me. He didn't say sometimes. He's like, I always have 2 defenders on me, which is also not true. That's also not true. He's not double teamed nearly as often as people want you to believe that he is. He's just not. Some of those shots were just dumb shots. They're just out of rhythm. They don't work. And so how can you implement a new offense if your best player and your leading shot taker has not bought into the fact that there was a problem with the previous offense? That to me is very alarming. And so that's my first place where I'm like, red flag number one, he is not at least publicly admitting that there was an issue with how the offense ran last season. Seems like, business as usual right now for Pascal Siakam. Okay. But if Masai Ujiri has had the conversations with him and the coaching changes have been made and he has been dangled to the point where his camp felt the need to, go out and say all the things that they've said, then I think that, these conversations have been had. And I think that Masai Ujiri basically saying, we need to see how he's going to fit in has flapped a lot of people the wrong way. A lot of people are saying, wait a second, this is your marquee guy. This is your franchise guy. This is an all NBA player in his prime. You're Toronto. You should not take this for granted that you have this guy, and that he's not demanding a trade and that he's, continued to work and be as good as he is. How are you not building the whole thing around him? How are you not just catering the offense and saying, you know what, screw this rookie head coach? And this was a point brought up by Will Lou today. It's just a rookie head coach. How can you put the rookie head coach's system over your franchise player? Well, I guess it depends on how critically you're willing to look at your franchise player and how much you believe in the philosophy of your rookie head coach. And I don't think that, if anything, I have noticed under Masai Ujiri, whether it be Dwayne Casey, Nick Nurse as a rookie head coach trying to navigate a championship, or now Darko Rajakovic, this is a front office that really, really, number one, they think hard about who they put into that coaching hire. And number two, philosophically, they support that coach. This is not going to become, unless something completely unforeseen and disastrous happens, I don't think if this doesn't work out, that it's going to be Darko getting fired within a year. I think if this doesn't work out, it's going to be players getting moved quickly. Whether you want to look at San Antonio, whether you want to look at Golden State, stable organizations back their coaches. For better or for worse, sometimes coaches are not perfect, but if you are hiring somebody extensively after doing so much research, so many rounds of interviews, you need to back that coach up, even if they are a rookie coach. It doesn't matter, because he may be a rookie by NBA circles, but he is not a rookie coach. He has coached longer than Pascal Siakam has been alive. I think that's worth noting. Okay. So when we, do the dick measuring, of the context of, well, this is a star, this is a rookie head coach, I think you need to give some weight to the idea that NBA experience is not everything, that ideas by a rookie head coach could be better than ideas that a 20-year veteran who's won championships has right now, and that the best idea has to win out. So overall, the Siakam, presser was a little bit concerning. I think another part of it that was concerning was just his insistence that because he's won a championship here, I'm not putting words into his mouth. This is literally a direct quote. He's won a championship here. He's the longest tenured. He thinks he's the longest tenured Raptor now that Fred's gone. And so he believes that he should be leaned on. He should be leaned on for information, that he and Darko should have that sort of. And it didn't quite extend into the Kyrie Irving, Steve Nash, like, we don't really need a coach, we're all head coach type of attitude. But there was an element of hubris of like, hey, I'm the marquee guy, I'm the franchise player. I know what's working, I know what's not working. So we're going to see what's up. So I don't see a happy ending to this Pascal Siakam thing unless he buys in. And I was more hopeful before today that he would buy in, because I've always prescribed to this idea of two knuckleheads. Can't have two knuckleheads in a locker room, otherwise they bounce ideas off of each other, and then they form more knuckleheads. And I just believe that if you removed Fred and you removed Nick Nurse, that you would remove a lot of the forces that were empowering Pascal Siakam to play the way he was last year. Because I naturally do believe that Pascal Siakam is not a selfish person, and I believe that put on a team which is willing to hold him accountable and put in a system where, the coach is preaching ball movement, that he would have no reason not to do that. But, there's just too much that he said today that makes me believe that he might have some hesitancy about changing everything that's been done. And I think, when I was talking about it with someone who's closer to the situation than I am, one of the things that I said was, he's played this way for 4 years now. They've nurtured it. They've promoted it. It's not just going to change overnight. And my biggest concern Not that I have a lot of concerns going into this season, but one of my biggest concerns is what happens if the Raptors get off to a slow start. Not only does, the vultures around the NBA start circling and they start saying, okay, well, maybe the Raptors have to rebuild. And now maybe you're not getting as much for Pascal Siakam as you could possibly have gotten this summer. But now also, when you start losing, that's when people start going into a default. So if someone's naturally a little bit more ISO heavy and you start out 2-7, maybe they're going to start going back into that and things just don't end up well. So overall, my take on the Pascal Siakam thing is that unless he shifts his perspective majorly to the new offense, because he made a notion today that it doesn't even matter. If you're a good player, you're a good player. The offense doesn't matter. This is ignorance. I'm sorry. Offense absolutely matters. It matters whether you're Giannis. It matters whether you're Luka. The offensive structure and how the player's moving around you. And, this sort of one-on-one style, JUCO style, basketball, it's not conducive, no matter how good you are at it. And to have a star player who wants to play one way, because it's the way he's played for 4 years under Nick Nurse, who's very unimaginative offensively, and to have a coach who's complete, like the antithesis of how he wants to play is that way. It should, of course, be very interesting to see how those egos clash. And from what I'm gathering, it seems like the locker room is firmly with Darko. So that's just my opinion. I think OG's with him. I think Scottie's with him. I think Gary's with him. I think Jakob naturally is splitting the difference between his old best friend and, his new coach. But I think that if there was a vote, I think most people on this team would vote to play more egalitarian, more equal opportunity. And while I understand that at the end of the game, it's always going to come down to, is my guy better than your guy? Can my guy get the tough shot when, doubles and triples are coming? I think the Raptors have a very good reason to question whether Pascal Siakam is even that guy long term, because he's shown for the last 3 years, his clutch percentages have shown that he's not that guy. And if Scottie is that guy, which he has shown flashes of it last year that he could be that guy, then I think you'd be stupid not to at least entertain the idea of moving Pascal Siakam. Unless he changes, unless he buys in, I don't think Pascal Siakam will end the season as a Toronto Raptor. Just my personal opinion, but it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to understand what the Raptors are doing overall, especially with the shift in the East. Drew Holiday going to Boston, creating, honestly, an almost unbeatable team. We'll talk about Boston at some point. I hope one of the callers brings it up, man, because that team is just juiced. Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis replacing Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is insane. And Marcus Smart. Okay, fine. Drew Holiday is a massive upgrade over Marcus Smart. Kristaps Porzingis is a massive upgrade over anything they had, stretching the floor. I mean, there is a very legitimate case last year to be made that Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis are on the exact same level as players as Pascal Siakam. Some people will call that crazy. I don't think it's crazy at all. Kristaps Porzingis, maybe the previous year, not so great. Dallas, not so great. But last year, he was incredible. Paint defense, incredible. So if he stays healthy and Drew Holiday comes in, oh my God, like the Boston Celtics are virtually unbeatable. I don't know why people are just talking about the Bucks. Like the Celtics have just, they also have Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. Like, my God, like, I don't know what the Raptors are aiming for at this point, if not to rebuild. They talked about, potentially we thought about going younger, but, we decided to, I don't know. I hope that we're not talking in 4 months about Siakam the way we're talking today about Fred, of what if-isms and, maybe we should have, maybe what. Because the opportunity cost of allowing this thing to play out, especially if we are to believe that they are not going to offer him an extension, this is just puzzling to me. What are you waiting for? Teams are not necessarily going to be more likely to make moves after training camp. Like, your best bet is now, and not trading him right now if you don't know how he's going to fit and you just want to see how it's going to work. To me, it just feels misguided and wrong, but I'll be happy to be proven wrong. Bad news about Christian Koloko. I think that was there's only one thing that made my heart drop today, and that was, learning about Christian Koloko. obviously one of my favorite players on the team. I have the utmost faith and belief in him as a player, as a prospect, as a person. And to know that just after his rookie season, for him to have to go through this heartbreaking, respiratory, condition problems that are keeping him off the court, kept him out of summer league, and now, a few months later, is still, being kept out of training camp. To me, he was a huge part of why I was optimistic about this season. And I know that might seem crazy to some people because some people see him as a G leaguer, but I thought this is a player who could take a massive jump in year two. He's super smart, really long, great defender. To have to do this without him, at least for the time being, with no set timetable on the return, is really sucky. And these development years do not come back. To lose a summer, and I'm not suggesting he lost a summer because he did do some work, but it's not as much as he would have liked to. And he's doing a lot of film study with the assistant coaches. So maybe in the long term, this is a blessing in disguise because this is a player who needs a lot of that film work and study work. And, we saw this last year with Chet Holmgren, where, you have a player who had to miss a very vital season of his career, but they kept him up to date. They kept doing film study with him, and hopefully he just got a little bit better for it in a different way. I hope they can do something similar with Christian Koloko if he misses any extended amount of time. But it's just a bummer to have to start training camp without him and to have him have to play catch up or whatever, because I don't think the Raptors have the wiggle room to, play around with it. But, Chris Boucher, Precious Achua, time to step up, maybe some big wings. If Scottie's 240, Pascal's, a big, Jakob's a big, I mean, they have enough depth that they can shore it up. I think I might be a little bit more concerned if this was a guard, because I think their guard depth is a little bit worse than their big depth, but still, it sucks for a young player that I have a lot of hope for. So I'm hoping that good things happen for him. Let's talk about, Scottie and what I think is possible for him coming up this season. So a lot of graphics going around about Scottie versus Tatum, et cetera. And, again, this offseason, people have been very split on the type of player they expect Scottie Barnes to be, right? Some people think, okay, last year, write it off. Things weren't right in the locker room. He addressed it today very honestly. He said it was a bit of an energy zapper. It kind of kills your energy to play the way the Raptors were playing last year. That things are much better this year. Vets are a lot more supportive. I wonder who he's talking about. I mean, geez, man, like there's so much said between the lines of what he's talking about. I think that this will be the deciding factor of the season. Not just because he's definitely one of your more talented players, not just because, he's really what you're building this whole thing around. And if he doesn't work, this whole thing it makes no sense at all. I just think that this happens with players sometimes where a situation railroads them for a little bit, but they get better for it. And I think that, everything that he's talked about, everything that I've seen from him, everything I've heard coming out of that side is just that he's just so focused. Like he's really worked hard this offseason, like harder still than, he worked even the previous offseason where he worked very hard. That, there's a lot of trust in him from the coaching staff, which I think feels really good if you're a lead initiator, to have the trust of your coaching staff. And, just in general, I think, people who give this much energy also absorb so much energy. So it's just good to see him in good spirits. I really do think that this could be an all-star season for him. And I know that, and that pretty much catapults it. Because if Siakam and Jakob Poeltl and all these guys, they maintain status quo, and then he just jumps to the next level as an all-star, well, now you're talking about, like a really different team with a really, really different offensive structure. There was a chart by B-Ball Index that came out a couple of days ago about the ratio of self-generation and three-point shot making, and ultimately shot creation and three-point shot making being the Achilles heel for the Raptors last season. So the fair question is, has this gotten better this year? I think a lot of people have said that no, it hasn't, because losing Fred VanVleet, you lose a lot of your shot creation, at least in terms of volume, and you lose a lot of your three-point shooting, again, in terms of volume. But something that I would caution and stress as a reason to be a little bit more optimistic is that Fred VanVleet was not, for the most of last season, an elite shot maker or a shot creator for anybody. And this was my biggest criticism that I levied against him all season, that when he was driving, shit was not shifting. And ideally, when a guard is taking rep after rep to break down the defense and get into the paint, and they're sucking up possessions, sucking up bigs, having to set picks for them, ideally, them getting into the paint, getting a paint touch should collapse the defense. And it simply didn't happen last year. This is unfortunately something that I think the media just decided not to cover fairly, in my opinion. But it's something that should have been the biggest criticism against Fred VanVleet, which is that defenses simply did not treat him like the star that he thought himself to be. And that level of creativity outside of within the context of what the Raptors were running for him was not generating clean enough, good enough, or just clean or good enough looks for the players around him. So the question then becomes, have you actually upgraded or have you stayed somewhat neutral? And I think there is a fair case to be made that it's hard to argue that you've gotten necessarily better, but I don't think that there's a really strong argument to make that you've gotten worse. That's just my opinion. I don't think you've gotten worse. So a lot has been made of Scottie's lack of handle or inability to break down the defense. Okay. But, when Darko was asked about it today, what's the advantages of a big playmaker? I think the obvious answer was he's really good at seeing passes that other people can't, and he can actually make them from the angle that he's making them at. And with all that talk about him working on his left hand, I really don't think he's as bad at this as people make it out to be. I don't know. Like sometimes I'm watching Scottie tape and I'm just like, okay, like he's doing all these things. And granted, it's not as great as you want it to be, and it's not as great as it's going to be within a year, but it's like people talk about him like he can't do it at all. And I've seen it in spurts where he can break down his man. It's not effective. It's not Cade. It's not Jalen Green yet. His skill level still has to catch up, and it's catching up. But man, this is a 240-pound guy who can occasionally roll into post ups from the mid post and has like this entire range of shots. And granted, last year his touch was not there, ankle injuries, all sorts of stuff, tendonitis. But if his touch is back to kind of where it was rookie season, and his handle and his overall scoring package is improved, and he continues to advance the mid-range stuff, this is not a player that's very easy to stop one-on-one. Like, I don't understand that. The second part, and this was talked about a lot in the press conference, which is what is the strength of the Raptors? Well, if shooting is not the strength, well, are we still going to see a lot of the possession battle mapping of crashing the offensive glass? And of course, yes, you are. You're playing 3 huge players. Actually, you're playing 4 huge players in your starting lineup. That honestly, you've gotten so much bigger this year. That's just a simple fact of it. You've gotten bigger across the board by getting rid of Fred VanVleet and just adding Dennis Schroeder. You're adding so many inches to your to your lineup. Scottie Barnes getting bigger, Jakob Poeltl being there for a full season. Whether Christian Koloko comes back or not, Precious Achiuwa, like this is a really big team. And there's, in my opinion, like a really strong correlation between how well you collapse the paint and how open the threes you generate out of those looks are, depending on if your offense is structured to make the adequate passes to make that stuff happen. And last year, whether you broke down your man or got into the paint or not, seems like the passes were late. Spacing was atrocious. Players were getting into the paint and then just stopping in the paint. And Darko talked about it today. He's like, you can't just stop in the paint. You're just clogging it up. You need to move. You need to relocate. You need to set a pick. You need to get someone coming back door. I know that Pascal Siakam sort of downplayed the impact that a different system could have for this team. But I tell you, as someone who pulled out half my hair last year looking at this lack of system, the system that they're putting in my opinion, is exactly what separates a good team from a really good team, or an average team from a good team. It can boost the win total a lot if this team plays more to their strengths. I have a lot of questions about, what this roster is going to be like, right? We don't know if Scottie's going to start at point, if Dennis Schroeder is going to start at point. I know Gary Trent Jr. is singing Darko Rakovic's Kumbayas right now, but is he going to be singing the same tune if Darko decides to bench him? I don't know. I hope I don't know. What do you guys think? Who would you rather start? Just let me know in the comments. Would you rather start Gary or would you rather start Dennis Schroeder? Because honestly, I see the advantages to both. I don't think either one of them is a great defender. I don't think either one of them is atrocious. Um, okay, let's just get to some of these comments. Gary. All right. Yeah, I mean, I totally see it. I think there might be some worry about dribble penetration without, Dennis Schroeder. I think the Raptors in the past have often opted to go with two guards. Granted, that might have been a Nick Nurse thing, but that could have been a Masai thing as well. They've done it for a really long time, whether it was with Fred and then Kyle, together playing these sort of two playmakers. Personally, I think you have it. Granted, not in an ideal sort of like conventional package in Pascal and Scottie. So you could conceivably do that, but I think that might, at least early on, feel like a lot of pressure to put on Scottie and Pascal to sort of makeshift play point guard because Gary, OG, and Jakob are not point guards at all. So it's like maybe Dennis Schroeder is there as a break in case of emergency. We need to, the lineup's not working. We don't have enough creation. Scottie and Pascal are not being able to shed defenses effectively. We need that additional, breakdown ability. But I could make a really strong argument. You didn't really have a lot of breakdown ability with Fred VanVleet last year. And honestly, with Jakob Poeltl and the precision with which he set some of his picks, I'm pretty sure I could get myself open for a shot on one of his, picks. So you really don't need, I don't think you need to start Dennis Schroeder personally. I've been on record all summer saying I would start Gary Trent Jr. Think he's a better shooter. I think he's a bigger defender. I think by starting Dennis Schroeder, moving Scottie to the 2, or moving OG to the 2 and Scottie to the 3, I think you lose some of your size advantage that could just be, it could be really difficult for another team to match up. I mean, my God, Scottie was really hard to match up with as a rookie when he came in at 227. Can you imagine him at 240 now? Chiseled out, 240, point guard, 6'9, 6'10, 240. Like, I mean, there isn't a team in the world that's designed to match up with him there. So it's just, it's tough. We need a stretch 5. I agree with you. I fully agree with you. And I hope for, for all of their streakiness that it could be potentially, Precious Achua or Christian Koloko or Chris Boucher or Otto playing small ball 5. I mean, let's not write off Otto. Like, he's starting the season out healthy. I think that could be a really big thing for this team. For sure, man. I mean, like, he's hijacking half your offense to get screens to make himself look effective. But if you don't set picks for him, like, he's not getting past anybody. Like, he wasn't like his, maybe early in his career. I went back last year and I watched some of his G League stuff from like when he was a rookie and a second year player. Yeah, he was a lot quicker back then, and he could actually do a couple dribbles and then occasionally get a step past this guy. But last couple of years, it's been straight up picks. So I think, personally, all the talk about, oh, Fred VanVleet got what he deserved, blah, 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 blah. I mean, what are we celebrating here? He is on a perennial loser, and he is about to get massively exposed, in my opinion. I don't want to devote any time this year talking about Fred VanVleet because he is gone, and I got my wish, right? And you asked me last year, what was my wish? A new coach who preaches ball movement, check. Fred VanVleet gone, check. Nick Nurse gone, check. Like, I got everything I wanted. I have no reason to complain right now. I've literally... like, this is like, if it was bingo, I got bingo. Like, this is 100%. I am satisfied with what has happened. The only thing I could make a case for is if Pascal Siakam has not bought in, if you're not extending him, if he's not part of the long-term future, get off him. But I'm not one of those people that's like, oh my God, Pascal Siakam has to be off the team. I don't care. Personally, I can go either way on him. Either way. OG and Siakam will both walk after the season for nothing. Not even a chance in hell is that going to happen. I think OG is very happy here. I think he will be even happier with this new coach. He seems to be really vibing with the core that they have here. I would not be surprised, in my opinion, if he has an extension done in the next, few weeks. I think he's extension eligible really soon. Siakam, on the other hand, yeah, that is a game of roulette that the Raptors are definitely playing right now because, I think Will Liu and Alex Wong, they brought it up too. Where if they were Pascal Siakam, they would feel some type of way about how he's being treated. I agree. I agree 100%. If he sees himself as the type of player that he sees himself as, which he clearly does, and he's always talked about himself as an All NBA guy, a franchise player, first option, top 5 player, all that stuff. If he thinks he's that good and the organization is not even willing to put an extension in front of him, and apparently through Michael Grange, I mean, take that with a grain of frigging salt. But according to Michael Grange, he's willing to sign, not Supermax. He's willing to sign the max extension. If that's not being offered, well, I'm sorry. Now what are you doing? Because if you're not signing him for that, like now you are even below where I would be, right? Because if honestly, like I'd probably sign him to the max extension. Like it's not an unreasonable thing to say that he's worth that. But look, they've dangled him for 2 summers in a row. They have a really good idea of what his trade value is around the league right now. I think what they may wish, and the one reason they may wish that they don't let this linger till next summer is because my expectation is that he would be the top free agent next summer. And that almost always means there's going to be some team out there that's going to be willing to assign him to a max, at which point, you have lost almost all of your competitive advantage in terms of contract negotiations. And God forbid if that team is a San Antonio or, a team where there is no taxes in the state. Now you really are playing the same game that you played with Fred VanVleet, where you just can't offer enough to make it competitive. So I think that I'd rather see a decision on this sooner so it doesn't have to linger over, the Raptors' heads all year. And I know that there was some notion made about like, well, it's a lot like the Kawhi situation with Nick Nurse when he was a rookie head coach. And there's a very big gap between 2018, 2019 Kawhi and 2022, 2023 Pascal Siakam. Number one, that should be where the conversation ends. This is not a marquee franchise, type of guy. I think most of the teams looking to trade for him, the ones that we've heard of, always saw him as a complementary piece. So, let this be a lesson to all franchises out there. You can give guys shots and you can get them into All NBA, you can get them to All-Star, whatever. But if the rest of the league doesn't see them as that, they don't see the efficiency, they don't see the impact metrics as that. It's kind of like how, not really comparing necessarily, but Bogdanovich was like the number 1 option for the Pistons last year. Does anyone else see him as a first, second, or third option? No. It's happened before. Like there are a lot of teams like that. They push out a guy, they try to boost his numbers up, whatever. They try to elevate him into a 20, 25 point per game scorer. But the rest of the league simply is too advanced, too smart. They see through it, So look, the reason that I hope that Pascal Siakam buys into this is because I think that we haven't seen the best version of Pascal Siakam. I think the version that we saw of Pascal Siakam that was probably closest to the best version of himself was the version playing next to Kawhi. Now, you don't have a player of Kawhi's caliber. Scottie's not there yet. Maybe he'll never get there. But this is the ideal role for a Pascal Siakam. Running, running in transition, getting off the ball, moving quickly, crashing glass, being a pest defensively. Last year, too often, what I saw was a guy waiting his turn a lot. Sometimes the offense would generate a very poor look for him and he would go into the ISO bag, which I completely understood. But sometimes the offense generated a great look for him, a clean, open look from the top. And instead of just putting it up and getting the person who passed him an assist, he would just go into his bag and start ISOing and, try to draw a double and then, maybe make a pass out of it with like 2 seconds to go. And now someone's forced to take a really bad shot. And we broke it down many times, in those low light clips of like just low IQ plays like that. And, whether it was Pascal doing it, whether it was OG doing it, OG did it a lot too. I think the difference here is that, with OG, like he accepts that he's doing the wrong thing. He talked about it today as well, that, he needs to watch more film. He needs to understand when the double is coming, when to get off the ball, how to read passing lanes, when to drive, when to go. It takes players so many years to figure the intricacies of basketball out. This is rhythm, timing, and this is what most young players just never have. This is actually what's so impressive about Grady Dick is, at least from what I saw from him in Summer League, he really gets this. Like intuitively, he seems to understand better than most rookies When is it his time? When is it somebody else's time? That is just shining light on basketball IQ and early coaching. But Pascal Siakam, for whatever reason, OG Anunoby to a lesser degree, not to a lesser degree, almost to an equivalent degree, but to a lesser volume, they just don't seem to have the greatest handle on when what should happen, you know? And I think that, strong coaching can help with that, because there's a teaching element to coaching as well. But yeah. No, he's going to get 200 million no matter what. Why not try for 300 million? I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. Look, man, if the Raptors have already told him the Supermax is not on the table, which I think has pretty clearly been relayed to him, then there's really nothing to aspire for. Just because you qualify for a Supermax does not mean that the team in question has to give it to you. Number one. Number two, the team in question is the only team that can give it to you. That's the whole point. So if the Raptors have basically just vetoed that option, then there's really nothing to aim at here. There's nothing to aim for. And that could be very deflating for him. But I think it should also be pretty sobering reality. And this is a team that probably is highest on Pascal Siakam. There probably isn't another team in the league that believes in Pascal Siakam as much as Masai Ujiri and the Toronto Raptors. And I don't think that they see him as a franchise cornerstone or a future Giannis type. I think they may have had those ambitions 3-4 years ago, but having just now witnessed the catastrophe and the runs and the playoffs, and it's gotten better. It's definitely not the bubble anymore. Like he's shaken some of those cobwebs off. But you would be really stupid as a general manager, as a president, to have seen the last 4 years and to come into this season saying, yeah, we're riding with him hell or high water. There definitely needs to be some sort of qualification to how far you're willing to go on loyalty. I know that a lot of people will criticize Masai Ujiri for saying, we respect Fred as a player and that's why we didn't trade him. And this has become a very, very prevalent talking point over the last few weeks of like, why didn't they trade him? Why didn't they trade him? I wish some of the people who are saying this now could go back and see what they were saying at the trade deadline. Were they asking for us to trade Fred VanVleet? No, they were asking for different things, right? They were asking for additions. So look, it's really easy to point in hindsight and say, well, could have done this, could have done that. The deal wasn't available. They decided to respect Fred VanVleet. Right or wrong, yeah, you lost him for nothing. Maybe he didn't respect you, but at the end of the day, I keep saying it. There's a contractual force majeure put into every contract, which is to basically say, hey man, if the world comes to an end, I'm not liable for what happens on this contract. So if there's a flood, a fire, whatever. I think Ime Udoka taking that Houston job, deciding to shift away from James Harden. I mean, can you name me 10 people on earth that prefer Fred VanVleet over James Harden? I can't name 10. I don't think I can name 3. I can name 2, and Ime Udoka is apparently one of them. So look, I don't understand it. I will never understand it, but apparently that's the way they decided to go. That offer was not there for Fred VanVleet when the summer started, but by the time Ime Udoka took that job, that money, apparently the Houston Rockets are such a trash organization, so they had to max them out. You couldn't match it. Okay. It's not the end of the world. And look, I put this on social and I'll say it here too, because I think, it's worth saying. If you sign Fred VanVleet to the contract that he got from the Houston Rockets, let's say you match it even relatively close, you simply put, do not have a lot of players on this team that you currently have right now that you probably value. So the other day, I made a poll on Instagram and a lot of people responded. It was like close to 220 responses, which is great. And the poll was, what would you rather have? Fred VanVleet at $35 million, or would you rather have Dennis Schroeder plus Jalen McDaniels plus Gary Trent Jr.? Because I will tell you right now, if Fred VanVleet gets paid what he got paid by the Houston Rockets by the Toronto Raptors, they're a tax team. And they're not going to be a tax team, so they'd have to dump Gary for nothing. They wouldn't use their mid-level exception for Dennis Schroeder, probably don't get Jalen McDaniels. So chances are, what would you rather have? And 97% of people, like, I don't think I would get 97% if I asked if the earth was flat. So 97% of people preferred the package of 3 players, Dennis Schroeder plus Jalen McDaniels plus Gary Trent Jr. So what are we complaining about? I understand the optics of it. He walked away for nothing. But what I really got pissed off about was there was an anonymous survey of 15 GMs, coaches, etc., around the NBA. I mean, granted, 15 is a very small sample size, but they voted the Raptors having the worst offseason. My God, in the NBA? Are you kidding me? How? How the hell did they have the worst offseason in the NBA? I don't get that at all. That's insanity to me. We give way too much credit for things that are done and not enough credit to things that are not done. And I think too often we ignore things that are not done because they're not sensational. Oh, they didn't trade, so and so. I mean, I wish the Portland Trailblazers hadn't done some of the stupid things they've done over the last couple of weeks. The team, trajectory would be very different, but they did. The Raptors probably had like 10 or 15 different options for Pascal Siakam this offseason, and they decided not to take those doors. We will never completely know what those doors were, but at the end of the day, like, we can judge fairly the options that they didn't take or take. And look, signing Fred VanVleet to that contract, to me, that would be crazy. If the Houston Rockets wanted to move off for Fred VanVleet right now, find me one taker for that contract. Find me one team that would, without you adding a first round pick, be willing to take that contract back in a trade and give you anything of reasonable value back. So if you think that Dennis Schroeder is valuable, like, I think he's a decent contract. If you think Jalen McDaniels has some potential to pop, and if you think that Gary Trent Jr. has, some value to your organization and is at least a little bit more tradable than Fred's contract, then yeah, you did get something back for Fred VanVleet. You got back cap space, man. Like, I'm sorry, like, I just don't get it. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, you don't ever lose a player for nothing. Like, I understand the optics of it because he walks in free agency, so you don't get anything. But to those people, and look, I've been guilty of this too. I've said, like, oh, you lost Marc Gasol for nothing. Well, what the hell was the option? Sign Marc Gasol to a contract that's, $10-12 million a year because he has way more value to you as a legacy center, who won a championship with you, and than he does to some other team where he's, if his market value is 5 and you got to pay 8, 9, 10, sorry to say, he's not going to have much trade value to you down the line if you decide to pivot. Look, I understand that some of the luster and shine has sort of fallen off of Masai Ujiri in this front office. I get that. I completely get that. And believe me, I feel it. And they have not been perfect. And they certainly have not been the beacon of, this is the model franchise. I think that perhaps right now, if you want to look at the model franchises around the league in terms of how they're running things, probably Boston, probably Utah, probably OKC. Okay, fair enough, right? These are the teams that seem to be consistently batting 100 right now, and maybe the Raptors have fallen off of that. But this is a far cry from poorly run organization, really far cry. I think they are still in the top 7 or 8 best run teams in the league. And maybe we've just gotten used to, well, trusting Masai. Masai is the best, executive in the NBA. We're the envy of the whole world. He would be president of the entire universe if it were not, for this team. I get that. But please understand that this could get a lot worse with a replacement. So, maybe like it's sometimes it's difficult to preach that, like, patience all the time. It gets repetitive. And just like, coaches wear out their voice and, they get repetitive and sometimes you need to change the voice. I understand that Masai Ujiri coming out every single year saying we are going to win here, winning is important, etc. But he hasn't stopped working. He hasn't stopped working. He hasn't stopped thinking. I think he hasn't stopped drafting well. I'm really stoked about some of the young players on this team. And I think that, if you give this team a chance, I think that you will eventually. I think there will be some fruits at the end of it. I think this team has a chance. I think they're deeper than people give them credit for. I think the roster makes a lot more sense than it has in a few years. I think they've finally managed to replenish some of the depth. I understand that, yes, you lost Fred VanVleet for nothing, blah, 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 blah. But I think, Masai sort of let it slip. Like, maybe we could be better off for it because Dennis Schroeder is really good. And, I'm not putting words into his mouth. He literally said that. So, I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. There's a lot to be cautiously optimistic about. There's a couple of concerns that I would like to see addressed. But overall, I walk away from media day hopeful that Christian Koloko has speedy recovery. that Scottie Barnes has a great season, that OG Anunoby is ready to take a step, that Darko Rakovic is ready for the challenge ahead of him, that Pascal Siakam is ready to buy in. And honestly, one of my biggest sort of takeaways was just how surprisingly optimistic I am about Gary Trent Jr. and Jakob Poeltl. Just sort of not talked about enough pieces on this team that potentially have the impact to make a really big impact on this team. I think, Gary is such a talented shot maker, a tough shot maker, especially in late clock situations, fourth quarters, etc. This is exactly what this team is lacking. And with Fred gone, I think you're giving a lot of those opportunities to the more talented shot maker and someone who could be very dynamic in that situation. Streaky, yeah, but he's good. He's a good young player. And Jakob Poeltl, man, like it's just understanding like how intelligent he is and just listening to him. I could listen to him all day talk about basketball. He's just such a smart player. And to have him, sort of anchoring your defense, and also having the trust of the head coach, Darko Rakovic, talking a lot about how they want to run the ball more through him and, run it through the post. And just the impact of having a big like that, it really does elevate your floor a lot. So my projection or prediction for the Raptors this year, honestly, on the low end is 37 wins. On the high end is 48 wins. So that's my range. I don't think they're going to fall under 37. I think there's too much talent. And I think the style of play and the players involved are just too conducive to winning. And I don't think they're going to get much higher than 48 wins because the East is stacked and they're going to have to go up against teams like Boston and Milwaukee far too often for them to rack up a lot of wins. I also think like some of the bottom of the East teams are just better, across the board, like the Orlando Magic. It's not a cakewalk anymore. There just aren't a lot of teams where you're just going to rack up. Like a lot of those teams are in the West, right? So yeah, it'll be interesting, of course, to see the season play out. I'm looking forward to it. It can't be worse than last season. I'm saying that it could be. It certainly could be worse. I don't want to tempt fate by saying it can't be worse, but I don't think it's going to be worse than last season. So anything is a step up in hopefully positive direction. And personally, I plan to be a lot more optimistic until I have a reason to become not optimistic. And right now, I have reasons to be cautiously optimistic. So I'm remaining cautiously optimistic, but I'm going to keep it 100 straight up. But I have no malicious streak in me. There's no like, okay, Fred's gone and, now Rob's going to go after so-and-so and go after Chris Boucher. And, I don't have any agenda. I'm a Raptor fan and I'm just hoping for good things for the Raptors. All right. We got a caller, Kareem. Kareem, man, what's going on?
How you doing, man? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's up?
Nothing, man. I'm just happy that the season's finally started or is about to start, and I feel like the discourse on from Raptor fans this summer it's been kind of wild, and it's good to see the season approaching soon.
Yeah, I mean, what's your biggest takeaway from Media Day?
It's kind of mixed emotions. I felt, I felt bad for Pascal. At the same time, I'm kind of expecting, it seemed like it was going to play out like this. And at the same time, I kind of wanted to speak about, like Pascal, the media has really been, they've really I felt like they created a Pascal is becoming the scapegoat type narrative today. And I found it funny that last year they kind of scoffed at the VanVleet is selfish narrative, and it seems like they really, really played up the Siakam what do you call is not selfish, if you understand.
Sure. So are you suggesting that the media is like making Pascal a scapegoat right now, or they're protecting him?
No, they're protecting him as like they're not.
And they're making Fred the scapegoat?
No, I should have used my different word. They're kind of making it seem like there's like nothing, no blame.
Is above criticism, basically.
Yes.
Look, I understand that from their side. They've grown up with this guy. they've sort of seen him evolve into this player. He's obviously very friendly with them. It's difficult to divorce yourself from the good vibes, right? Like the last positive season the Raptors had was the championship year. And, Pascal's a really huge part of that. So I understand that the nostalgia element of it would lead a lot of Raptor fans and a lot of Raptor media people to be like, Pascal is above this. Look, he's been successful here. Who the hell is Darko? Who's Scottie? None of these people were part of our successful time. This is a very regressive way of thinking about things, obviously, because Scottie was, 18, 17 years old when the Raptors won the championship. He couldn't have been here. Darko Rakovic was an assistant coach somewhere else. He couldn't be here. And, they want to protect Pascal, but there's really nothing to protect. The criticism is all fair across the board, for the most part, unless, of course, people are like, oh, he shouldn't even be a third option, in which case I don't think the criticism is fair at all. Talking about him being a selfish player, I think, is probably misguided. I don't think he's selfish, but I think he played selfishly last year. So, and that should be, that's fair criticism, and maybe the media right now is just rightfully very perplexed why your best player has not been given a contract extension and is being left to sort of, wander without a contract. It's not a good feeling. I
No,
imagine.
that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, that's something that it's pretty clear to wonder about. But the Messiah kind of just hammering home the selfishness and how the media kind of just completely just just put aside all that talk last year about Fred, and then now kind of just not having nothing to say about that. And it's kind of funny, isn't it?
Yeah. This comment here, I agree with the caller. Siakam is one of the hardest workers in the offseason. Nurse made him play ISO. Even if you don't like him, he should not be thrown under the bus. Look, I don't think Nick Nurse made Pascal Siakam play ISO. I think Nurse is just one of those player coaches that allows you to play how you want to play within the offense. This one-on-one stuff Pascal Siakam's been developing, granted, I mean, it's only developed under Nurse. But like, it wasn't really this way in under Dwayne Casey. You could say his opportunity wasn't there. His skill set wasn't as defined. His offensive role was not such. He was playing behind Kyle, DeMar, Kawhi. Like, he's played behind a lot of players. But this idea of here's my read on it. I think Pascal Siakam grew up in this system watching guys like DeMar and Kawhi. And the natural progression in his mind was, one day I will be like those guys. I will have control of the offense like those guys. I will take ISO possessions like those guys. And so modeling his game after those guys could be a little bit misguided, because that he's not that type of player. Just my opinion. I mean, you could make an argument he's better than DeMar was. You could make that argument, but he's not Kawhi. And so this idea of, like, and of course this DeMar experiment failed in Toronto. That's why Kawhi came. Like, it's not a failure in the sense that overall in general it's successful because you made deep playoff runs, but the Raptors during DeMar's run were not successful because of DeMar. They were successful because of depth. They were successful because of Kyle. And really, in my opinion, Kyle Lowry was the best player on all those teams every year. Until Kawhi got here, it was Kyle's team. So really, it's kind of like there's a disconnect between where wins come from and where the media thinks wins come from, right? DeMar was always held to a higher standard than Kyle because he scored more points, he was flashier, etc. But any impact metrics nerd would tell you Kyle was the best player on those teams, bar none. So, and he's a huge reason why they were as successful as they were. So yeah, I don't know. But I disagree with this comment, James. That Nurse made him an ISO player. No, man. Like, his off-season training was a lot of one-on-one stuff with Rico Hines. This is something that he's been working on. And honestly, like, you can see it. You'll probably see it this year as well. If he defaults to some of this ISO heavy stuff, well, Nurse is not here anymore. So I don't know. I think Nurse encouraged it, but I don't think he made him play that way. But yeah. Anyway,
I have a trade proposal for you.
A trade proposal for me. Okay. What GM am I and what GM are you?
All right. So you're Masai and I'm Daryl Morey.
Okay.
All right, so clearly this is kind of just playing off of Harden.
Oh, we lost him. Okay, he's back. Yep. Go ahead. Hello? Kareem, have we lost you? Try to remove you and put you back in. Hello? Oh no. I think we lost Kareem. Anyway, Kareem, sorry, man. Seems we've lost Kareem. If there are any more calls, I have about 10 minutes max more. Yeah, I look, it's a little early in the season to have doubts and to have things like, contract extensions looming over. And while, media day is usually full of optimism and kumbaya and everyone preaching, the party line of this is how we're going to play, we're going to change. We've heard this for years. We've heard this for years and years and years, and it doesn't change. Okay. So at the end of the day, you need a coach to enforce things. You need players to buy in. It all needs to work out that way. And I am very curious. My biggest fear is that the Raptors don't start out strong and boom, we're back to default. And suddenly guys are just like, because look, like, at the end of the day, this is a business. And I get that. I get that more and more every year that I deal with the NBA in any capacity. That this is a business for a lot of people. And that at the end of the day, you do have to look after the players' interests and their market value. And it matters. Of course it matters. So you can sell them on, hey, you want to be a winner, you're going to get paid. We win, everyone gets paid. But if that's your sales pitch and you start out 2-7, suddenly I think people start looking at you sideways and saying, well, you said we were going to win and, maybe we're not. Okay, we got Christian. Christian, what's going on, man? Long time no talk.
How you doing, Rob?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm all right. Not so great after media day, honestly.
Okay, talk to me. What did you hear? What did you hear that you
Like,
didn't like? What did you hear that you did like?
To me, just the whole energy was just so off for like a media day. Like nobody seemed happy.
Really?
Honestly, the only person that seemed happy was Scottie. Everybody else seemed like
he was happy.
Yeah, he seemed like he was like grinning and smiling throughout the whole interview and stuff like that. So he's in a good, but like he's the only one that seemed like really enthusiastic about what's going on. Like I understand the whole discourse with Pascal and everything and Masai. Like some of it is deserved, but like I just don't like the fact that it's out in the public for like the rest of the NBA to see. Like, how is the rest of the NBA perceiving this?
That's fair. That's a really fair thing. What is accomplished?
Thing, like,
but it's like it's weird because it's like sometimes Masai I think he's really honest. Weirdly enough, like I've always found him to be remarkably transparent. Like he may not always say exactly what he says, like what he means, but he lets you know how he feels. You know what I mean? Like it's remarkable transparency of a person. Like, it's like, for instance, like when I was at my screener, I hate the movie Crash, right? And someone
really,
I can't stand it. I just think it's so stupid. Anyways, so won best picture and everything. And so someone brought up Crash like while I was at the screener and while I was at my screening, and I didn't say that I hated the film, but someone told me after, they're like, "You really hate Crash, don't you?" I'm like, "Why?" It's like, "Man, your face just friggin' went stone when someone mentioned that." I like transparent people because I am a transparent person. If I don't like you, it's obvious. So like when Masai is answering a question, like he somehow finds a way to tell you what he means without having to tell you exactly what he means. And I think if you're reading between what he was saying, yeah, like he's got concerns about how Pascal Siakam fits into a team that doesn't play the way Raptors played last year. You're right, though. It doesn't really help to bring that up.
Yeah, so like to me, it's all, like I said, it's all about how the rest of the NBA is perceiving everything that's going on. It's just like to me, it's a bad look to have your GM and your best player pretty much going at it at the press at media day. Like media day is supposed to be technically like the most optimistic day of the whole year, and everybody seems depressed other than Scottie. So like that was the only thing I didn't like.
I mean, look at it another way. Maybe we're starting south. so that we can go north. You know, like
Maybe.
maybe we're starting at the bottom so we can
Then
go
again,
up
like
from here.
last year, everybody was happy, and then look what happened, right? So like maybe
I
this
think
is
I think the tough conversations have happened, and I think that that's important. You know what I mean? Like that, and that can ruffle a lot of feathers. You know, at least in from what I've heard in years past, the Raptors have taken a very laissez-faire approach to player development, and they've basically allowed players to say, okay, show us what you can do in the off season. Let's see the type of player you come back. Work on your handle. We'll see if we can expand your role in offense, whatever. Whereas this year, I think, you know, positive or negative, the play style was cemented the second you hired Darko Rajakovic. He started talking about how he wanted to play right away. So there's not a lot of leeway on like, okay, well, this guy's just going to blossom into our, you know, de facto ISO heavy 25 possessions a game guy. We've just already ruled out that style of play completely. And we've talked about, you know, like how we're going to move the ball through the post and move the ball through the high post and use movement and shooters and cutters and stuff. So it's probably like a really good thing, in my opinion, that you have identified very early what kind of way you want to play. And basically right now it's like people are just being sour because they've been told that they don't get to do whatever the fuck they want on offense the way they've done for the last 3-4 years. But I didn't get depressed or bad vibes from Gary. I didn't get bad vibes from OG or Jakob. I thought everyone was either very focused, really happy, really optimistic, at peace, or just curious. But I didn't get like bad vibes from anybody except for Siakam.
honestly, like I feel like the media's kind of blowing it up more than what it actually is. Because like the whole Pascal Siakam response, like he was baited into that. Like the way the question was asked, it was like he made it seem like, because the way the question was asked was like, you know, Masai was talking about selfish players,
and you're the first person he talked to.
Exactly. So like you're saying, basically the way he framed that is he's making it seem like the whole fan base thinks he's like the most selfish player he was the most selfish player on the team, when it was obviously Fred. But so like obviously when somebody calls you like the most selfish player on the team, you're gonna react in a certain way.
Fred's not on the team anymore though.
That's
in
true.
fairness, so he's not here anymore. And you know what? Here's a free tip for Pascal Siakam. If he wants to avoid all the, you know, stuff, start with accountability, start with acceptance, and don't say bet on yourself, because he did.
He said that.
He did say bet on yourself in relation to Freddie. He's like, oh, well, you know, Fred VanVleet, you know, I hate to take myself, but bet on
myself.
Oh, no, he didn't say that this year, but he did say that last year. Look, it's just, there's an optics and there's a nerve to it, right? Obviously, the Raptors fan base now, eventually, after some prodding, has come to the realization that the way the Raptors played last year was not conducive to success. It took, you know, failing in the play-in to really hammer it home. I think like even 3-4 weeks before the play-in, everyone was just like, things are just going to be fine. We're just too talented. And then it's just, you know, it just doesn't work. You know, even around the Fred VanVleet performance against Charlotte, the 2020, there was still optimism that things would turn around at some point, that things would start gelling. And it's just like, no, man. And look, at the end of the day, I've heard Pascal Siakam for years talk about leadership, being the guy. Kyle didn't get out of the way soon enough. I've just never liked it. I've never liked how he's approached this entire topic of being the man. I don't think he's a selfish person. But I think he played selfishly last year, and I think he should own up to it. But him coming out and saying he doesn't have a selfish bone in his body, he's never played selfishly, he's not a selfish player, whether prompted or unprompted, fair or unfair, that's factually not true, in my opinion.
That's true. I can see why he got so defensive, because nobody else was asked if they were selfish throughout the press conference, from what I saw.
That is fair. And he's not the only, and he's definitely not the only one. Like OG had moments last year. Gary had moments last year. Everyone had moments last year where I think they did a little too much because things weren't working or whatever. So anyone and everyone should have been asked about that question. And you're right. Like, it's probably unfair to single him out, but you're the franchise player. And like, you're the franchise player. You're the highest paid player. You know, if there's something that happened under your watch, like that to me is the most important thing, you know, which kind of differentiated a Vince Carter or a Chris Bosh or even a Pascal Siakam from a guy like Kyle Lowry, where when things happen with your team, whether you are responsible for them or not, as the franchise player, as the leader, you have to take accountability for things that aren't even necessarily your fault.
That's
and
true.
so if you were the leading shot taker, captain, highest paid player on a team that has been widely accused of being selfish, then you owe explanations. You should be the person answering those questions, whether you were directly the most selfish, least selfish, doesn't matter. It happened under your watch. And so like, and just, you know, seeing the NBA, I've never seen a team that went in a direction that was completely against what the best player wanted to play like. Never.
That's why like the optics are so bad. It's just like, I don't know. The thing is, like, I still think it's being made worse than it is, because even Darko said that, like, he's been trying. Like, apparently he was around, I think, during Summer League, he mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, every person who addressed this, whether it was Scottie, whether it was Pascal himself, whether it was Masai or Darko, the implication is clear. Pascal Siakam needs to adjust. Like Darko Rajakovic saying he's getting better at this implies what? That he's working on something to get better at. Like he needs to, you know, I don't have the exact quote, but I remember when I was listening to Darko's presser, there was some notion of like he's trying, he's making an effort, he knows that this is the right way to play. This sounds like, you know, this person's a drug addict. They know that they need to quit drugs. They know that, you know what I mean? Like it sounds like there's a problem and we're addressing it. So the implication is clear. Like you're not talking this way about Scottie Barnes. Like imagine if he'd said like, yeah, Scottie's trying to move the ball more because he knows. Be like, no shit. That's all Scottie does is want to move the ball. Like, you know what I mean? So the accusation is not necessarily that he's selfish. Is that he needs to adjust his style of play to fit with this current, you know, roster and how they want to play. And so at the end of the day, look, like you're a leading shot taker and you're a franchise guy, has to buy in. Otherwise, none of this works. Everyone else can move the ball, but if it gets to your hands, which it always will, and you stop it, the whole thing falls apart. He's the most important player on this team to get to buy in. And he's the one player that, in my opinion, so far sounds like he might have some resistance to playing a new way because he's been so successful playing this way.
I agree. But like he's been successful playing other ways as well. The most successful year I think he's had is the championship year, which is
100%. His impact metrics would agree that he was by far the most effective playing that way. But then the question then becomes, where's my Kawhi? Who are you asking me to defer to? You're certainly not asking me to defer to Scottie and OG. So what the fuck do you want me to do? And I get that too, because, you know, he's feeding off of whoever's creating those looks. And if the person creating those looks is not Kyle and it's not Kawhi, and there's not a player on this team, in my opinion, right now, unless Scottie takes the jump for the ages, that's as good as Kawhi or Kyle Lowry that year. So asking him to play second or third fiddle doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. It's not an easy pitch either. I get it. I get it from his side too. You know, you want more opportunities for OG on the ball, but at whose detriment? I can't make a coherent case that OG has having the ball in his hands is better than Siakam having the ball in his hands. You know, it's hard. It's hard to say that.
Yeah.
So.
Thing, because like to me, like as you know, like I'm very optimistic about this year. I've been optimistic ever since like Fred signed with Houston. Like I've been on this train. Like to me, the problem with the team last year was Fred and Nurse. I said that even during the season, as long as they're on, next year would be next year's going to be better. And the team's deeper. And honestly, like people keep on saying that. Even you said. I don't even think Fred, like maybe Fred is better than Dennis, but I don't think it's by that much.
It's a different type of player.
Different type of players.
But overall, in terms of impact, yeah, he is better.
Like he's a better fit for sure. Like he's a better fit just because of his play style, right? Because he's a way better shooter, volume shooter. But like I think Raptors were like last in like getting into the paint, or one of the worst teams to get into the paint last year. Like Schroeder's really gonna help with that, I think. And then everybody's complaining about the Pascal.
He's not the most efficient paint finisher either. Just because he's more efficient than Fred VanVleet, who is like record level inefficient, doesn't mean he's great either. He's not Ja Morant. He's not, you know, prime Russell Westbrook. Like he's still inefficient. I think as a point of attack defender, he's better than Fred VanVleet, but as a team defender, he's way worse. Like way worse. Gives up a lot of inches. Possessionally, I think if you cross match Fred on a power forward, I think he has a better shot. Even though like Dennis Schroeder's got the longer arms, Fred's just strong, man. Like he's
Really
got grown
strong.
man strength, and he does a lot of his work early. I think Fred's a smarter player.
Really good on the switches too. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, like, there's all these intangibles that Fred VanVleet brings. Like, I'm not trying to sit here and like be like singing kumbayas. He's not worth anything close to the money that he got. And so, if the money that he got is what he was going to get, then I don't give a shit that he left. And yeah, I tend to agree. Look, like, I think Grady's going to make a difference. I think Dennis Schroeder and Jalen McDaniels and a healthy Otto. Like, I just think like putting the ball more in Scottie's hands too. Like, putting the ball more in Scottie, OG, Gary, like having a little bit more, and just less Fred dribbling the ball around with his, head cut off. Look, I think it's going to help a lot. But here's something really funny. For a franchise that has cried over losing so many players, have you ever seen this franchise, like this fan base, happier that a player left than when Fred VanVleet left?
Well, it depends who you ask. Like, the media,
most
fans are happy, but the media is a totally different story. But
yeah, because they lost their inside scoop. Who is going to feed them all of their Scottie Barnes doesn't work hard enough stuff anymore? There's nobody left. No, obviously, like people try to double down on their takes, and if the Raptors get off to a slow start, which I'm dreading because new system, new coach, tough schedule, like they could get off
against Minnesota. Yeah,
I can't remember off the top of my head. We'll do a schedule breakdown. I can't remember what the strength of schedule is. I'm going to get to it in a couple of days and just really break down the schedule and see like where the strength is. Minnesota is not a cakewalk, obviously. Like, the talented as hell. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think the league overall is just more talented than it's been in a few years. There's just so many good teams. Final thing. Now that I have you here, Boston, Milwaukee. What are your thoughts?
Oh man, I just can't wait for them to play in the Eastern Conference Finals. Honestly,
it's a foregone conclusion, right? Everyone else is just going for third.
Oh, like Eastern Conference, like it's been set in stone. Like the Eastern Conference Finals been set in stone. It's done. But
who would you take in a 7-game series? I'm leaning Boston.
Milwaukee.
Really? Okay.
Milwaukee. It's just like when it always comes out to the best player, and if you're gonna ask me who to pick between Tatum and Giannis, I'm always gonna go towards Giannis. Like Tatum, like
it's close.
Like, to me, it's like Tatum. I think his game's way too finesse for me personally.
He's also on the upswing, though. Worth noting, like he's 24, 25 years old. So, and he's shown me at least for the last 4 years that he always comes back better.
That's true.
So, like, if he takes a step up and Giannis takes a step down, the gap between them may be like not that large. And I'm also really curious to see like how much
Pollard is going to shut down Dame in that series, though, and I think it might be pretty bad.
I don't know about shut down. I don't think anyone can shut down Damian Lillard. I've seen a lot of players try. I've seen a lot of players fail. I have also never seen Damian Lillard with such a talented roster around him. The best player he's ever played was like LaMarcus Aldridge and CJ McCollum. Playing with Giannis Antetokounmpo is like 18 levels up.
There's like this clip going around on YouTube. I think it was like a 2018 playoff series.
Yeah.
And I think it was Portland versus the Pelicans, and like Drew really gave him a hard time during that series. So it's going to be interesting, though. But yeah, I'm leaning towards Milwaukee. Yeah,
it could be interesting. I just think that their core is more on the downside. Like Chris Middleton, like the wear and tear on that dude has just been so notable. He's in his, he's close to his mid-30s now. Brook Lopez is 35 years old. And I mean,
the thing about Boston is that they're due. That's the thing. They're due. Like they've been knocking at the door for the last couple of years. And like usually you have to go through your losses before you finally make it through. Even Giannis went through his losses, losing to us in 2019 and everything. So like
they are due, and they've been knocking on the door for a while. But I also think like people are not giving enough credit to how good Kristaps Porzingis is, man. Like that guy is just, I mean, like the talent level, he might be the most talented player his height ever. Like it's insane. Like everything people are talking about with Victor Wembanyama, this is the prototype. I mean, granted, people expect Wemby to be better than Kristaps Porzingis, but this is the original unicorn. And I mean, granted, he went through a troubling time in Dallas, the final playoff series being a disaster under Rick Carlisle. Maybe not, but last year he was incredible. in Washington. I realized they didn't win a lot of games, but like it's not his fault. Like he was great.
No, he's very talented. He's gonna help them a lot, and plus he's like going to be their fourth option. So like,
I mean, that's the crazy part. Yeah. Third, fourth option, Kristaps Porzingis. Like, oh my god, like this guy has only ever, at worst, been a second option, and he's been great at it. At in times, you know. So having him as your fourth, has there ever been a more talented fourth option in NBA history? Yeah, I'm struggling. I'm struggling so hard.
I've never seen him in a big moment before, so that's why
I have. I mean, like that first playoff series with Dallas, I mean, he had like a 5.7 box plus minus. He was incredible. The second playoff series he had not with Boston, with Dallas. The second playoff series with Dallas tanked all of it. And then suddenly it's like, oh, Kristaps Porzingis is a choker in the playoffs. But there was a lot going on with Dallas's offense back then. I think he's due. Like like this guy could put up 40 points in his sleep. Oh, so talented, so free, and such a good paint protector. Like I would have entertained the idea of like if he was a little bit more durable, like a Siakam for Kristaps Porzingis swap with additional stuff added. Like if, for instance, like if the Wizards were willing to give up 7 and Porzingis, I would have given them Siakam in a second this offseason.
How old is
go ahead.
How old is Porzingis?
26.
Okay. All right.
I want to say he's 26. I could be wrong. He is 28. My bad.
Okay.
28. Still, I mean,
it's a history. If it wasn't for that, then like, yeah.
He's been relatively healthy though. Recently. I mean, you know, and with big players, you know, sometimes it comes and goes in waves. You know, you can have like a couple bad years, 3-4 good years. You don't know. Could be a change in his body, in his diet. Sometimes guys figure it out a little bit later, like where their conditioning needs to be to stay healthy, what their movement patterns are. Sometimes they pick up yoga. I don't know. I've seen it happen before where players go through like 3-4 years of trouble and then suddenly it's smooth sailing. Saw it with Vince Carter. Maybe we'll see it with Kristaps Porzingis. I'm rooting for him. I love the Boston Celtics. Not something that I expected to say like 10 years ago, but I love Jason Tatum and I'm rooting for him. And if it's not going to be the Raptors coming out of the East, I want it to be the Celtics.
I could never cheer for them.
But you can never cheer for the Celtics?
I could never cheer for them, but I like their players though. I could just never cheer for the Celtics or Boston in general.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a hell of a job, though, right? Like, you cannot understate the job that Brad Stevens has done retooling that team. Like, losing Marcus Smart initially was just like, whoa, what are they doing? And to have Drew Holiday replace him as like a vast upgrade.
Oh, Drew Holiday, wow.
Like, so much. This is not disrespect to Marcus Smart, but Drew Holiday is in a different class of player.
I really wanted the Raptors. I was hoping the Raptors were going to try to trade for him after the whole.
What would you have given up, though? I mean, given what it cost, what would you have given up? Because I mean, you don't have picks unless you waive your protection, and then
I would have waived the protection. I would have given. I don't think Portland would. I don't think Portland would have wanted Trent back, but I just for contracts, Trent, Boucher, and I guess Malachi.
Trent, Boucher, Malachi, and a pick?
Yeah.
Holy shit. I hear you, but he's 33 years old, and you're not contending with Siakam, Barnes, OG, and Drew Holiday anymore. I mean, you might be a little bit closer. Sure. Like, I'll grant you that. You get better for sure. I don't know what your window is, though, right? Like at that point, and I think I brought it up in the last live too. I just want to see this Scottie on ball thing, and anything that pulls him off the ball and forces him to space or whatever. I don't want to see that. Would you consider making a trade right now for Malcolm Brogdon though? Because a lot of what you're getting with Drew Holiday in terms of the shooting and stuff, at least you get with Malcolm Brogdon. No, doesn't excite you?
Not really. No.
I think he would. I mean, if injury history was not such a concern and the physical failing and whatever, I think like he shot like 44% from 3 last year. He was incredible.
But the thing about Drew is like he plays very well out ball as well too.
That's fair as well. Yeah. I mean, I think the Drew Holiday thing would make a lot more sense if you didn't have Dennis Schroeder on the team already, and you can't trade Dennis Schroeder. Like, granted, I'd be happy to have them both. Like, no problem.
But at that point, you have like the best like point attack defense in the league, or one of the best, if you have those two.
The more you talk about point of attack defense, the more I realize, yes, Drew Holiday would have been great. I think Damian Lillard would have been fantastic. I think the writing is on the wall about what was being offered for Dame, because if OG was not being offered and Scottie was definitely not being offered, then the only thing you were offering was Pascal.
I heard that they were trying to keep all three of those guys. That's
fucking crazy. If they I don't understand. Did Portland just did anything to spite Dame? Really? I mean, he rescinded his trade request when he couldn't go to Miami, and they just said, "Nah, we're good."
But in a way, it makes sense. If you get Dame, you're not really competing if you don't keep all three of those guys.
I think that if you traded Dame for Siakam,
I think
you are definitely competing.
Really?
I think it's a significant upgrade. I mean, from a fit perspective, you're shoring up so much of the three-point shooting and shot creation that you lack with Siakam. You immediately turn Barnes into your de facto point forward, and there's nothing in his way now with Siakam because Dame is a completely different beast. He operates at a completely different part of the floor. I just think of offense if you keep Gary, Grady, Dame, Dennis Schroeder, if you're just losing Siakam and French
Grady was involved in the trade. I heard
that would be sad, but also completely worth it. I like Grady Dick a lot, but not enough for me to be okay, well, forget it. Top 75 all time, Damian Lillard for 2 more years of his prime. Can you imagine how box office that is?
Well, in my opinion, let's just say for a second, let's say that they didn't want to include those three in the trade. So what kind of offer would it be? Grady, Precious?
There's just nothing. There's nothing. It's so hard. It's $45 million, $46 million you have to take back. You're not you can't trade them 7 players. So you're going to have to trade Gary at minimum. That's $22 million right there. Then you trade Boucher. That's another $12 million. So now you got to $34 million. I mean, shit, there's nothing on your roster that makes sense. I mean, they're taking back 2 players that are barely worth anything right now. And then on top, what are you adding? Thad? You adding Malachi? These are worthless pieces. These are just contract fillers. So even if you added Grady, waived the protection on your next year pick, and then added a couple of picks, this is still not a great package.
Did you see that Shams tweeted out Raptors originally?
What?
Shams tweeted out he tweeted out he did it by mistake and deleted it right after, but he tweeted out that Raptors got Dame. He tweeted Raptors got Dame. Basically the trade, but Dame going to the Raptors, and then the same concept, but Raptors replacing Milwaukee, and then he deleted it right after.
What did he say that the Raptors gave up?
That's the thing that he didn't. It just says Raptors got Dame, Portland got Ayton, and then Phoenix got I forget the center's name, but yeah, and then he quickly tweeted out, and then he deleted it right after. Obviously, when
could have been a typo.
Yeah, I think the Raptors were close, and then
I just don't think you have anything that even close to the value of a Drew Holiday without including OG or Pascal. There's just nothing.
No.
If right now you wanted to trade Gary plus Boucher, plus a pick to Boston and say give us Drew Holiday, they wouldn't give it to you. So why would Portland value whatever the hell that is? Unless you were talking 3 future picks plus Grady. Now we're talking completely different concept. And then, now I'm a little bit worried because you're trading a lottery pick plus 4 picks for a guy who explicitly has said he doesn't want to be here. And you still got Pascal Siakam on a contract here. I don't know. I would have, if it wasn't for Siakam, I don't know how I make that deal.
Did you hear the Bobby's interview
today?
Well, it wasn't a full interview. I just saw a clip. I guess he was doing a one-on-one interview with somebody. And then they asked him about the Dame Lillard situation, and he said that they're really aggressive with the whole Dame situation, and apparently they offered the best offer they've ever offered for any player.
To me, that cannot be Grady and fillers. They just can't be. So if Masai is saying they didn't offer OG, then maybe they offered Pascal and Grady. That would be crazy, but wow. If they did,
that would be great.
I gotta scratch my head on that one for a second. If I would even give that much, but yeah, I mean, I get it. Look, man, it's freaking Damian Lillard,
top 75 player.
Yeah, I mean, top 75, but he's still like a really, like, people sleep on him, and I don't get it personally. I watched him for years, man. He's so good. I understand defensive issues, and yes, like, but this is a guy who, like, just come playoff time, like, he could win you a series like so quick. And he's just so much gravity, and it's just what he's been able to do in Portland without much help. Um, when he's been healthy, it was just incredible last year. So look, I think Milwaukee got a great one. I would have loved for the Raptors to get him, but wasn't in the cards. But if Bobby Webster is saying that this is the best offer they ever put together for a player, and you're telling me that Pascal, OG, and Scottie were off the table, then I am very confused. Very confused. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, that's just I think Mark Stein reported that like last week at some point. But yeah, and then like I heard the whole Bobby clip today on Twitter. But yeah, anyways, before I go, give me your prediction for stats for Siakam, OG, well, the big three.
Oh, we have a big three now. That's funny.
That's my big three.
Siakam, OG, and Scottie. Siakam, I don't know, 24 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, kind of like pretty consistent with what he's been. OG, I could see working up to 20, 25 and 5, 25 and 4, something like that. That would be a big step up for him, I think, like the 5 and 4 element.
But I think that's very possible.
I do too. Yeah. And for Scottie, I think it could be
my
22, 8, and 7. That would be like a very, very great season for him. And I know that would be a huge step up.
If we have 3 20-point scorers, it's going to be a really good year.
Scoring is also up around the league. So 20 point per game scores, especially with some guys expected to miss time, other guys expected to fill in, etc. It shouldn't be too complicated. But yeah, it might be on the cusp of 20 points per game. It might be like 19.7, 18.9 kind of thing. But
Scottie was like, would have been like, like 19, 6, and 6. I don't think he's going to rebound that well just because Hurdle was on the team.
19, 6, and 6 would be a letdown for me, to be honest. It's not enough. It's not enough for a future franchise player. It's not enough for a guy that you've held out of conversations back-to-back summers for like two franchise level players in their prime.
He has to crack 20 points this year.
He has to. He absolutely has to. Like, there's no excuse at this point. And I'm like taking the kid gloves off too, right? Like, for sure. Like, he has to. Like, there's nothing. There's no more. There's no. It's not even that there were excuses to begin with. Right? I want to be clear. Like, I'm not trying to come down hard on Scottie Barnes, but like, Nick Nurse is gone. We're gonna play the style of play you want to play, and let's just be clear. He's the loudest voice in the room last year for playing this style of play.
Yeah.
By far. He's the only person who, after those losses, was like complaining about ball movement.
I just think he's so unselfish to a fault. Like,
I think he's going to get a little bit more selfish.
Like, I feel like he'd rather have 10 assists than have 20 points.
That may be the case, but I think he hopefully at this point, after 3 years of kind of doing it, the default way that he's used to playing, I hope that he realizes, and I think Darko realizes this more than anyone, and I think that it helps when a coach can constantly remind you and reinstate this for you. He needs to score for his passing to be as effective as it's going to be. So understanding that, like, one of the things that, that I've often talked about was like, he needs to rethink what it means to score. Scoring is a way to unlock your playmaking. The more of a threat you are, because too often, if people know you're going to pass and know that your natural instinct is to pass, they just don't play you. And they don't play you, you're making your life harder for your teammates. So once it clicks for him, and I think it has, to be honest, I think it has clicked for him, that if I'm not assertive scoring, I'm actually making life harder on my teammates. The minute he figures that out and it really sets into his brain, you'll see, like, 20 points per game should be a cakewalk for him. He's too talented. He's too big. He's too strong. He generates so many advantages. If they're playing fast, if the pace is right, if he should be able to get a couple corner threes every single game, couple of transition breaks, boom, that's 10 points right there. This 20 points is not asking for a lot from him at all. He should be able to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And what was I gonna say? Do you believe the whole growth spurt he had?
That would be wild though, right? Like, I mean, I've heard of players having growth spurts at
I've
21,
always said
22.
to be honest, but like more of a guard.
He does look bigger. I don't know if it's just the way he's
Like,
standing, but he seems bigger. Like I saw him standing as OG, and it's like usually like they look around the same height. Maybe he's an inch taller. He looked like a solid 2.5
I
inches
need to
taller than
see him
him.
next to Jakob.
You saw him next to Jakob?
I need to, basically. That'll determine it, basically.
That would, yeah. Jakob is a solid 7 foot. I mean, even next to Siakam, like if he's as tall as Siakam, then what he's saying is true. And Siakam's, I think, 6'9.5", 6'10".
Yeah.
At this point, I mean, honestly, it doesn't really matter. 6'8", 6'9", 6'10". It doesn't matter. He's huge. He's a huge human being. Yeah, like I remember he feels it, I gotta tell you, I've been around a lot of 6'7" people in my life, just playing basketball and whatever. He's never felt 6'7" to me, ever.
He looks so huge on the court, never.
Like I remember one time I was talking to his dad, and it was just like it was such a weird thing because we were talking about like this height discrepancy with Scottie, and his dad sort of laughed it off like that he's not like 6'7", because some people were saying, oh, he's 6'7", he's 6'7", because his dad is pretty tall. Mm-hmm. And I remember there's this picture of his dad and Cade and Scottie, and they're all together, and it's just so obvious like how much bigger Scottie is than the other two. And so it's just like, to me, it's like, it's never been about 6'7". I think he's always like, is he 6'8" or is he 6'10"? That's kind of the thing. And we've always split the difference and just said he's 6'9". But if he is 6'10", that's not profound. You know what I mean? 6'9" to 6'10" over a summer or over a year. Nick Nurse once joked about that he's 6'10", 6'11" once. Yeah. I remember that too. So, I mean, whatever. It doesn't matter. 240 is, to me, the more alarming number here. 240 for a guard is big.
Humongous.
Like that's bigger than some centers, especially in the modern NBA. If he's 6'10", 240, that is basically the size of your average center, and he's playing guard for you. That's crazy.
He needs to live in the paint.
I want to see him all over the court. I think he needs to be in mid-range. I think I like the promise that he showed in the mid-range pull-up, turnaround, midi post area. He needs to do that stuff. I know that that's sort of like the star zone, like that's really like where stars operate. But if he's gonna be that at some point, he's gonna get that in his diet. And he
to be very aggressive. Like whenever he gets like the defensive 100%. Rebound, I want him to push it down the court until he stops, until somebody stops him. And
absolutely.
Then decision. If nobody stops, dunk the ball every single time.
I think he gets it, man. I really do. I think just again, listening to him, hearing him out, hearing how he's talked a lot this summer. He's done a lot of interviews. He's done like a lot of pressers and stuff.
He knows his time.
He knows.
He knows.
Like he knows this is his team. He knows they're building this thing around him. I think the conversations that happened after last offseason were basically, Scottie, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with this team? Let us know so we can fix it now. And, again, like I said it today on Instagram, and I'm sure you saw it. Like, it takes courage, man, to be a 21-year-old calling out your vets, like publicly calling out your vets, saying, openly going out into the media every day and just saying, I don't like the way we're playing basketball. We need to move the ball a little bit more, blah, 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 blah. Like, to be the voice of that, because you're going against your franchise player, Pascal Siakam, you're going against your captain in Fred VanVleet, and you're going against your coach. You're going against all three at 21 years old, and you win because they sided with him. They believed, they put a coach in who's vibing with him, and it's playing out exactly as I thought it would. I thought Darko would come in. I thought the improvement would immediately be felt by players who are naturally selfless. Guys like OG, Scottie, Gary, guys like this. I thought they were going to immediately gravitate towards his message, and that's exactly what's happening. Those are the people that seem to be really moving towards him. And let's just hope that Pascal Siakam buys in too.
Yeah. I think he will. He's if anything, he's a professional at the end of the day. So I don't think that's the thing. Like, I don't want it to, because like Siakam's not James Harden, So like,
in what way?
Like as a professional,
I like James Harden. So you're gonna have to clarify what you mean by that for me.
Well, him not showing up to media day.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean,
look, and you could easily say that like the way like the Raptors have talked about Siakam throughout the whole summer, and compared to like how Philly has talked about necessarily James Harden, it's like not comparable, but like at least like with James Harden, it kind of seems warranted in a way, because this is what he does, kind of like is kind of quit when things aren't going his way.
I think it's hard to judge James fairly because like he's been involved with so many trash franchises. Like I think Philly's a pretty trash franchise. I think Brooklyn is a trash franchise, and I think OKC back then was pretty trash. I mean, just in terms of ownership and how they deal with things. And I think Houston is a pretty trash franchise. I think there's about 15 trash franchises, and I don't think that it's necessarily James Harden's fault that he's played for 4 of them. I would, however, like to see him play for a stable organization. I'm not saying he's innocent in all of this, but I also think that if there was a deal promised to
He was
him,
definitely lied to. He was definitely lied to.
okay, so therein lies the question, right? He's a top 50 player of all time. He's going to retire as a top 10 scorer of all time. He's a second leader all time in 3-point shooting, and he spent all of last season trying to get somebody else an MVP award while taking a pay cut. I mean, to me, it's like the distortion here is wild to me, like how people turn on him so quick.
I understand. Is this because of his, I guess, his resume, basically? Just because
I think it's just reputation. I think it's like, you know, the media wants to talk about you one way. I mean, you're a bit aloof, and it happened with KD, it happened with Kyrie, it happened with Russ, it happened with a lot of players, you know, where the media gets a little bit of taste of you, and you know, it's happening with Scottie too. That's like what I was trying to prevent last year from happening, because like you could see today when Scottie was answering questions, everything was like, okay, so did you do things different than you did last season? The implication is so clear that once people get it in their head that, okay, this is a guy who quits, or this is the guy who doesn't work hard in the offseason, it just becomes a narrative. And it's not a fair thing to throw at somebody when it's not true. You know, I think James Harden's a fantastic teammate. But like everything I've ever heard from anyone who ever played with him was he's the best teammate.
Oh, I'm never going to question him as a teammate. Like I said, it's all been him as a professional. So
right.
Because he does certain things that like kind of adds to the narrative, like showing up out of shape, and like just not showing up in general, or having clubs at a party, having signs with your general manager.
Oh, for sure. Right. But I mean, he's not the only player to go clubbing, right? I mean, you know, it's like look, you remember the witch hunt for Vince Carter. So there was like I think it was a time when Vince was here when you know he was supposedly injured, and like he danced on stage somewhere at like at a concert, and people lost their minds, right? It's just, if people presume you to be one way and then you see a hint of you being that way, it's going to become a witch hunt, right? So if at any point Scottie starts out slow this season, it's going to be like, oh, he didn't work hard again. The narrative it's a narrative generation machine. So we need to be really careful as media, as fans, etc., when we level an accusation at somebody, calling them toxic, calling them whatever, because I'll tell you right now, if the vibes in Houston are not good this year, which presumably they will not be because the team will lose a lot, it's going to come right down to Fred VanVleet selfish. It just, the narrative sticks, you know? With James Harden, I think part of it is fair. I think part of it is not fair. Someone saying here like, oh, he turns trash franchises into dumpster fires. I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, if I was running a team, I think
trade for him right now.
I would, yeah, I would. I would have a conversation with him. I would try to understand him. But look, man, like a lot of these owners, they lie to these players all the time. GMs, coaches, they lie to these players. They don't talk to these players. I've heard horror stories from players who are like, yo, my coach hasn't talked to me in 5 months. Now I'm supposed to judge that player on how they're acting when they haven't been talked to by their coach in 5 months, but we're not talking about the coach that hasn't talked to his fucking player in 5 months. All franchises are not equal. Like, so the one thing that I really appreciate about Masai Ujiri, and like the thing that, you know, most players, and apart from DeMar DeRozan and what he leveled at him, most people would say, like, I have a really good relationship with him. He's been honest, transparent with me. He's a straight shooter. He told me how things were, and that's how they went. That trust is important. Now, if you show up out of shape to that, like, I mean, okay, are we criticizing Pascal Siakam for basically tanking his trade value by saying he won't extend with any other team? Should we? Should we have, you know, an open discourse about what is the responsibility of a player, you know, in that situation to not, basically tank his trade value because he wants to preserve his right to chase all NBA or because he wants to stay here or whatever. I mean, it's his right. He's a businessman. He can say, I don't want to go anywhere. Just like Dame could say, I don't want to go anywhere. But this is not necessarily helping the team at all. It's not necessarily helping the team procure a good offer for you at all. So it's like, I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, and I don't care about players going clubbing. Like whatever you do on your free time is whatever you do on your free time. I don't care about that. I brought it up because like it was funny. He had signs. It was like over the weekend or something. He had signs in the club saying Daryl Morey's a liar. So it was just pretty funny. But yeah,
that's petty. I think it's just getting petty because Daryl Morey has a picture of him in his house, like it's a bust or a painting or something.
Yeah,
it's crazy. He loves him. He loves him off so hard, and it's like it's kind of funny, right?
James Harden kind of owes him a lot too, in a way. I don't want to say that. I don't want to.
I don't know about that. I think if James Harden owes anything to anyone, it'd probably be to Mike D'Antoni. But I will say this much: Nick Nurse turned down Milwaukee to be the head coach of the Sixers.
Did he? That's looking bad. That's looking. Really
that's looking like the dumbest move ever. That's a little bit of Schadenfreude for me right now because I'm obviously still a little salty about what Nick Nurse did last season and how he quit on this team. So, to me,
he's having a hard time so far in Philly. At least like the media is giving him a hard time.
I haven't been keeping up with it.
I saw a quick clip like they asked him about James Harden. I think they asked him, "Is James Harden a part of this team?" And he kind of gave like a aloof answer, like not really answering the question. And like if it was here in Toronto, they would just let it go and just move on to the next one. And then the reporter's like, "But you didn't answer my question."
You know what? Toronto is getting better with this today. Did you notice? There was a question asked of Darko Rakovic about the staffer who was currently in the lawsuit, whatever, and they asked him whether he was a part of the team. And Darko kind of like skirted around it. He's like, "We need a yes or no," and Darko's like, "Yes." I'm like, "Good job, Toronto media. You're doing your actual job here."
I was like, "Damn, okay."
That's good. I mean, look, I wish they'd had the same balls with Nick Nurse last year. They could have just been like, "Hey, man, like, what's going on with this team? What's going on with Scottie? What's going on with whatever?"
Yeah.
But hopefully this is the Toronto media is evolving. Hopefully not devolving into the Philly media because that is a cesspool of garbage. But yeah, like we need honest answers. That is literally the point of the media, is to be able to ask honest questions that are fair. Yeah. And I think most of the questions that were asked today were fair. Maybe a couple weren't, but I think you brought them up already.
If one thing why I want the season to go well, I just want to see Masai happy again in the presser. Because like the last couple pressers, honestly, like I want to see Masai like the more energetic Masai. I miss that guy, But he seems so down in the last two. So like hopefully things go well, and then next time we see him,
Yeah, I mean,
fuck this city or some other city.
Hopefully, with age and wisdom has come a little bit of humility also with the fuck Brooklyn stuff. But I will say this much. Part of his presser was spent talking about like, and Pascal's as well, was talking about being blessed. Like feeling like, hey man, like my job's not that stressful. I'm blessed. I get to. This is usually the course that people take when they are really looking and grasping at straws,
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're really stressed about your life and you're like, I know things are going bad right now, but I'm really blessed. I'm real blessed to have food. I'm really, really blessed to be able to do the job that I've reverted to that myself. So I could feel Masai's stress.
Oh yeah.
Heavy.
Because like you have today. To be the golden boy, like he's never really been doubted throughout his tenure here in Toronto. So like this is the first time and they're actually like doubting him in like straight to his face. Like they're not like it's straight to his face. Like, yo, we don't believe in what you're doing right now, basically. At least the media doesn't. But
I mean, you know what? Fair point. He hasn't really been batting 100 for a while. And you know what? Like I've kind of noticed this myself, is that when people question you or when people demand more of you, they're actually doing you a favor, because what they're doing is reminding you that you can do more. I hate when people, artificially lower the bar for me. And, I brought this up about my screening, my feature film screened. And, after the screening, like some people were talking like, all right, man, it's good enough. You need to let it go, whatever. And then Like I didn't feel that way. And then I was telling my friend Brian about it after, and I was just like, yo, like I got this, that to work on. And he's just like, what are you fucking doing talking to me, boy? Like go work. And it was just like, that's what you need in your life. Like we all need that persistent voice to ask us, like, are you doing your best? If not, what are you doing to change it, get better, continue to work? Because it's a reminder that we can be better. You know, I remember when I was like in grade 7 or grade 8, I don't know how you were growing up, but a lot of my teachers wrote me off because I was coming from government housing. They knew I had a tough childhood. They knew I was having a lot of issues at home. So they're kind of like, you know, there's a natural inclination to go softer on the kid who's going through the hard time. But it took a teacher to kind of push me and be like, but you're capable of so much more. You're not living up to your potential. This, you know, and yelling at me, like fully yelling at me in front of others. It doesn't feel nice in the moment to be doubted and questioned, but it's a reminder that somebody sees more in me than I see in myself right now. And that's a good thing. So I'm glad that people are not just, you know, giving Masai a lifetime pass because he won a championship here. Typically, Toronto sports has worked that way forever, where you win a championship, you just, boom, it's forever. 10 years, you get a lifetime pass. Nick Nurse didn't get it, which is great. You know, he was starting to get questioned last year, and now Masai's starting to get questioned. And you know what? Yeah. That's great. It's a good thing. It's not a lack of loyalty. It is just a lack of nostalgia, which I'm happy about.
Yeah. All right, Rob.
All right, man. Peace. Have a good one.
You too, man.
Good conversation. See ya. All right. To the 270 of you in here, I would very, very, very much appreciate. First of all, thank you for joining this live. I told y'all that I would like to keep these lives under 2 hours, and I'm going to stick to that. So yeah, I'm happy to have this conversation, and thank you to the callers who called in. To the 270 of you here, 278, 280 of you in here, I would really appreciate if you like this video and hit subscribe if you haven't hit subscribe. And you know, let's see how the season unfolds. I'm again cautiously optimistic. I hope for good things. I hope that everyone buys in. I hope that at this time in the trade deadline, we're talking about, you know, whether the Raptors are going to have home court advantage, who they're going to be facing, etc. That would be great. And I'm really expecting big things from Grady Dick. I think, you know, a lot of people are really writing him off because he's a rookie, but there are rare rookies that contribute to winning right away, and I think he could be one of them. I think the Raptors have something in him. Just seeing the charisma and the charm and how he carries himself, you know, even in the Blue Jay stuff. And I'm not saying he's going to be perfect right away. I'm not saying that he's going to be like a starter or anything like that, but I think he has, you know, the capability of giving this team a much needed punch off the bench occasionally. And look, man, rookie Tyler Hero was a revelation in the bubble, right? If I remember correctly. And I mean, Grady has the makings of being a bigger version of all of that stuff. If he can figure out some of the on-ball stuff, Darko Rajakovic just talked about, you know, having the ball in his hands sometimes, giving him some reps to be more than just a shooter. If he can blossom into that type of player for the Raptors, then the Raptors really do have, you know, a future, maybe fringy all-star type of player. And that could be very exciting too. So I'm really excited for the Raptors season. Let's wait for preseason, see what happens when the real games start. But I'm expecting more ball movement. I'm expecting better vibes. And I'm expecting an offense that does not make me want to pull my eyes out. So good to see you as well. Thank you, everybody. I don't think I spotted any super chats or anything like that throughout this chat. If I missed it, I apologize. I wasn't super attentive to the chat, but hope y'all had a good discussion too. Peace. Have a good one. Good night.